Hi everyone. I'm going to read the introduction to a Nepalese version of the story Rumpelstiltskin. I travel for two reasons. The first is to perceive life as an accelerated kaleidoscope of wonder. The second is so that I appreciate my own existence in a different way once I eventually reach home. On my wanderings, I always see people traveling together in pairs or in groups, and I watch them. The very fact that they're not alone means that they're prevented from what I believe to be the most important aspect of travel from taking place. By endlessly chattering, bickering, or joking amongst themselves, their attention is diverted from what they ought to be taking in. You see, I'm a believer that the only way to really travel is to travel alone. It's the solitude that defines a journey, and the solitude that provides the opportunities missed by those in a group. When I return home, I bedazzle anyone who'll listen with the grand extravaganzas of my journeys, but I hide from them the truth, the interminable meals alone, and the loneliness and the solitude, which of course is all that really matters. Obsessed with traveling on a shoestring and alone, I used to listen for ultimate backpacking outposts that tested the traveler, preparing them for the trials and tribulations of life. While putting up at a rat-infested hovel in West Africa, I first heard mention of the legendary Invisible Dragon Hostel. A pair of hard-worn European travellers were sharing memories of it. The stink in the drains was like the stench of rotting fish, the first had said. The mattress was caked in slime and filth from the gutters, the second had added. I doubt anywhere quite so wretched exists, anywhere on the planet Earth, the first had intoned. Eagerly, I waited for a little more information. When it didn't come, I plucked up courage and asked where this holy grail of the backpacker experience was located. Kathmandu, the travellers had both said at once. So it was that I plotted a trail across Africa and then Asia, eventually arriving at the Invisible Dragon Hostel at 1 minute before midnight. Many years later, I was to spend 16 days and nights in a Pakistani torture prison. As I languished there in solitary, I reflected how it was a luxury experience when compared to the Invisible Dragon Hostel of Kathmandu. The Nepali capital specialized in lodgings for impecunious backpackers, and the Invisible Dragon Hostel was a rite of passage and the preeminent experience for having reduced a backpacker's stay to the very barest bones of possibility. To say it was cheap was a huge understatement. Indeed, it was so affordable that those who managed to adapt to its toe-cringing simplicities tended to reside there for years at a time. Having stayed there was to be regarded by backpackers elsewhere as a kind of wandering dervish, one who had managed to shun every last comfort of Occidental life. Upon my arrival, I was given a bunk in a room on the second floor. It was drab, dirty, and very horrid indeed. One of the other backpackers in my dorm was a disheveled French traveller. He kept going on about the rooftop. I asked what was so special about it. Regarding me with a glazed look, he almost began weeping as though he had glimpsed the gates of heaven. Up there, you'll find absolutely no luxury at all. he said wistfully. I shrugged. I haven't seen any luxury down here, I told him. The Frenchman grimaced. You, my friend, you look too pampered for life up on the roof, he said, a hint of challenge in his voice. And that is how I found myself sleeping up on the roof, where the backpackers slept on bedrolls and relieved themselves in metal buckets. Like lifers doing hard time, they were held in the highest regard by everyone else. Having waited for more than a week for a space to open up, I joined the ranks of backpacker royalty up on the roof. In that curious twilight zone of discomfort, newcomers were given the best spot first. The longer they stayed, they were promoted, or rather they were demoted to worse and worse spots when they freed up. On the morning I was given a bedroll and a bucket and permitted to sleep up on the roof, I met the resident of bedroll number 1, the most putrid, vile, stinking spot in the entire establishment. And as such, it was the most coveted of all. Named Frank G. Withlow Jr., he was an American of indeterminate age, with no front teeth, ragged clothing, and a smirk that never seemed to leave his face even when he was asleep. He told me all about his life, that he had once been an insurance salesman in Utah, that he had a penchant for clam bisque, and he stated twice that he had no time at all for imbeciles. By way of making conversation, I asked if he had met any interesting people in Kathmandu. The American looked at me hard, his eyes brightening. Thought you'd never ask, he said. I swallowed. You have? Yep. Who? Local man on a bus. Told me something that's rattling around my head. Frank G. Withlow Jr. flopped down on his bedroll. He took off his shoes, rubbed his feet in thought, and told me a story that I had known before in a very different form.